Painting without paint.
Hello, artists. What's one of your favorite things to do in art? Painting, right? I know. Some of us don't have paint at home, and so you might think, well, I can't paint if I don't have paint. Clearly, right? Or maybe you don't have paint brushes. And so you might also think, well, I can't paint. But you're wrong. There are things all over your house and around your house that you can use to make brushes and paint. And today, that's what we're going to explore. What can you use if you don't have paint? Or hey, maybe you just want to try some of these out even if you do have paint because it's fun to experiment. So let's check out first some of the brushes that we can make.
No paintbrush? No problem. Try a makeup brush, Q-tips, cotton balls, leaves, sponges, cardboard, grass, feathers, fabric, yarn, or something else. Or try an internet search for more paintbrush alternatives like these. Bind your brush with staples, rubber bands, paper clips, binder clips, clothespins, tape, or string.
So now you have a few paintbrush solutions. There are a lot of other things you could use too. Just make sure you avoid things that are going to fall apart easily, like tissue, for example. When tissue gets wet, it comes apart very, very easily. You want to use something sturdier. Also, make sure that if you're using something that needs to be bunched up or bound together, that you make sure it's bound pretty tightly and it doesn't come apart a lot while you're using it. So now that you know some kinds of brushes you can use, if you already have paint but you didn't have a brush, you can go get started. And if you didn't have paint brushes or paint, then check out the next part where we're going to explore some different things that you can use instead of paint.
Try painting with drinks like coffee, instant coffee, black tea, instant tea, green tea, herbal tea, juice, and Kool-Aid. Paint with condiments like ketchup, mustard, barbecue sauce, soy sauce, hot sauce, chocolate sauce, Worcestershire sauce, and balsamic vinaigrette. Paint with food like berries, spinach, carrots, beets, herbs, boiled onion skin, tomato, and purple cabbage. Paint with things in your kitchen like colored sanding sugar, vanilla, food coloring, lemon juice with heat, turmeric, paprika, and other spices. Or try other things around your house like nail or shoe polish, cream makeup, toothpaste, or dry makeup or dry markers mixed with water or rubbing alcohol. Nature provides paint in things like leaves, clay, grass, moss, flower petals, and mud. Here are some great examples of what it can look like to paint with paint alternatives and what they look like on copy paper and on lined paper.
So artists, you have a lot of great paint options. I'm sure that everybody will be able to find at least one of them in your home or around your home, but there are a couple of things to keep in mind. Number one, make sure that you have permission to use whatever you've gotten first. You don't want to go digging around in the weeds you see around the house. You know, you might accidentally touch some poison ivy, so maybe check with somebody and ask them to help you out in finding something. And you don't want to go taking your big sister's makeup without permission. You want to ask first. You know what? She might very lovingly let you have an old makeup brush that she doesn't use anymore and an old eyeshadow color that she doesn't need anymore. But ask first. And of course, don't go digging in your grandma's spice drawer without asking. Always make sure you have permission before you take, okay? If you are using materials like food items, it's also good to keep in mind that those things can attract critters, like little insects and creatures that like to eat nice things. If I've put a mashed up blueberry as paint, well, that's also a very tasty item. So we might attract ants, for example. So keep in mind that some of these items are not things that you're going to want to keep around. Make a beautiful painting, share it with people, take a picture of it. Maybe you can hang it up for a day or two, but then make sure you get rid of it so that you don't attract a bunch of pests into your home. Once you know what you're going to use to paint, Now you have to decide how to paint with it. Now with some items, it's easy because if it's already a liquid or if it's creamy, then you can just paint with it like it is. So if I'm using a drink, tea or coffee or juice, then I can just paint straight on the paper with it. It's already a liquid. If I'm using a condiment like ketchup or mustard or barbecue sauce or soy sauce, again, it's already creamy or liquid-like. I can just paint directly on my paper with it. If it's something that's a little bit harder but still creamy, like a lipstick, I could probably just paint with it. Other things you're going to need to change. So if I go dig out in the yard and get a little bit of dirt or clay from the ground, I might need to add some water to it to make it movable instead of just a solid. If I get anything that is a leaf or a flower petal or like a blade of grass, then I can deal with it a couple different ways. I could mash it. That's a good way to get some concentrated color out of it. Or sometimes it also works to boil it. Now, anytime you use heat, you definitely need to have the permission and assistance of an adult. Other items that work, like your foods. A beet has a lot of color. I'll tell you what, I think if you took a slice of a beet, you could probably use it like a stamp because they are so colorful. But if it has juice, you can use the juice to paint with directly. If it doesn't, you can boil the beet and get juice from it. So you just kind of have to play around with it and see what's going to work. But again, always make sure if you're going the heat route to get some help and get some permission before you do it. Also be mindful about where you paint. So some of these things can stain. If I'm using shoe polish or beads or nail polish and I get it all over the floor or the table or the carpet or the couch, you know what? This is probably not coming back out. Make sure that you have set up a mat to work on top of, and that could just be something like a piece of newspaper in some instances, or maybe work outside. But make sure that your area is set up so that if you get any of your paint on anything else, that it's not going to damage anything permanently. Now, I know I already mentioned this, but do make sure that you have permission to use anything that you're using before you just go take it. And also remember that some of these items are going to possibly go bad. So you want to keep in mind those two things. Do I have permission to use this? If so, proceed. And what's going to happen to this in 3 days, right? If I leave my ketchup mustard painting on the table, how many critters are going to come eat off of it? And will it be moldy? One of the most important things when you're using alternative materials, guys, is just to know a lot of this is going to be experimental. Some of it's going to be successful, and some of it's really not going to be successful at all. That's okay. You're learning to use supplies that you wouldn't normally be using for this purpose. So try some stuff out, and if it works, great. And if it doesn't work, that's okay too. Take pictures of all of it though, because everything that you've tried, you've learned from. Here, artists, you can see some stuff I've been playing around with. So this is a cup of turmeric and water. And you see how it looks like there's a circle, a small circle, this dark one, inside of a larger, lighter circle. You can see that my turmeric is separating from the water. So every time I paint with this, I have to stir it up again because all that turmeric is settling onto the bottom of the cup and the water is above it. So on these two pieces of cardboard, and in our last video we talked about using things we have around the house. So this is a piece of a pasta box, and this was a piece of cardboard that was inside of a package that used to have sheets in it. So what you can see here is that I was making a value scale, and I was putting one layer of color and then building it up 7 times. So this is 1, this is 2 layers, 3 layers, 4, 5, 6, and 7 layers. The one beside it is paprika, and then the one beside that is the coffee I was talking about earlier. You can see that even after 7 layers, because the coffee was so thin that it had hardly any color in it, but down here, that was 1 layer. So it was very, very pale. And on this one, of course, this is brown on brown. Coffee's brown on brown paper here. You can see a little bit by the time it got down there, but it's just barely there at all. I wanted to show you on both of these papers because if you're working with what you got at home, you never know what that's going to be, but probably you have some kind of food that came in a box or something that came in a box. So this is white, a white piece of cardboard, and this is brown cardboard, and it doesn't matter which one you have, you can definitely paint on both. You can see especially how my spices have shown up very clearly on both, even though the coffee wimped out on me. Now I started to paint this little guy over here. He's going to be like a little tiger cub, but just like over here, how I had to have lots of layers to get up to the very dark colors, so far I've only put down 2 layers. So I painted the entire guy with 1 layer of paprika paint, and then when it dried, I added a little bit more, so you can kind of start to see where I've added some striping, made the center of the ear darker, started adding ears and eyes and nose and mouth. And he will obviously need more layers. Let's look and see how layers of paint can really make a difference. So one thing that I forgot to do at the beginning was to make a wash. A wash is where you take your lightest color, just 1 layer, and cover your whole paper in it so that your paper is not the same color anymore. It'll have just a little tint of color. So now I have a wash of paint back here, very, very light. You can also see other values. So we get a little bit darker in some areas and a lot darker in others. And we achieve that by painting, letting it dry, painting, letting it dry, and continuing until we have it as dark as we want. Another cool thing that happens with alternative paints is the texture. Now this one has a sandy texture because the spices did not dissolve into the water. If you're using other materials, you may find that yours has other textures. This also has another bumpy kind of texture. You can see where there's a pattern of light and dark paint, and that happened because this is cardboard. What I'm painting on matters, and you can see all those little layers in between the sides of the cardboard. Those cause the paint to pool up in some areas, and where the paint pools, it dries darker. All right, artists, I want you to make yourself a paintbrush, make yourself some paint, experiment, 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 take pictures and share them, and have fun.